I never imagined my life would end up like this. Quietly, with a suitcase resting on my knees and my heart shattered, I traveled in the back seat of my son's car, heading to a place I might never return from. They told me it was for my own good, that they needed space, and that I could no longer stay at home because it was too much for them to handle. But I know what it means to be a burden, an extra weight, something that no longer fits, something that annoys. If it were up to me, you would have been there months ago, Carla said from the passenger seat without bothering to look at me. Her voice hit me like a stone thrown with anger and disgust. My daughter-in-law never liked me, never hid it. Yet every word she spoke still hurt as if it was the first time. My son Michael kept both hands steady on the wheel. He said nothing. His silence was even louder because he was my boy, the one who swore he would never leave me alone. And now he could not even meet my eyes in the rearview mirror. I simply pressed my lips together. I would not cry, not in front of them. I refused to give them that victory. I caressed the rough fabric of the suitcase on my lap. That suitcase carries more memories than the house they bought together. It was with me when I crossed the country to give my children a better future, when I buried my husband, when I moved for the last time, and now it will be the silent companion of my exile. Meanwhile, as the car moved forward, the streets seemed to stretch endlessly, as if they understood the fate awaiting me. Outside, people walked casually, completely unaware of my personal tragedy. I wondered if anyone else had endured the same experience, if other mothers had been discarded like a plant that no longer blooms. The place has gardens, Carla added with a cold tone, and activities. It is not as if we are abandoning you. That was precisely what they were doing. I swallowed the words, scorching my throat. If I spoke out, I would scream, and I do not scream. I had endured too much to fall into that. I simply watched as the buildings faded behind me, as my neighborhood disappeared from the rearview mirror. That house where I raised my children, embroidered their names on the towels, and cared for my grandchildren when they were ill. Now it was no longer mine. I no longer had a place there. 2 nights ago, I overheard Carla speaking on the phone by accident. I had thought she was asleep. She said she could no longer bear it, that I interfered with her life, that I was ruining her peace of mind, and that an old woman like me had no reason to be involved in her home. She said it just like that, using those words. Michael was there. He did not stop her or correct her. He only said, "It is already decided." My son, my firstborn, the one who held my hand when I had a fever, was now organizing my exile. They forced me to pack. They did not even let me choose what to take. Carla opened the wardrobe and began stuffing old clothes into the suitcase. She said she could not carry too many things. "In the nursing home, there is no room for your junk," she muttered. She put away the picture from my wedding but forgot my medicines. She packed my winter shoes yet left my photo album behind. She glanced at me sideways and said, "The important thing is that you stay warm," as if the cold I felt was on the outside and not inside. Diane, my granddaughter, was the only one who hugged me that night. She told me she loved me and did not understand why they were doing this. Carla scolded her for meddling where she was not wanted. Michael did not say a single word. His silence hurt me more than anything. During the journey, Carla kept talking. She described the place as if it were a hotel with a dining room, kind caregivers, and even other elderly people to socialize with. Yet every word she spoke sounded hollow, empty, just a bandage for guilt I did not even feel. "Besides, you will not have to bother with household chores anymore," she added with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "The house. The one where I cooked for 30 years, where I washed, ironed, swept, cleaned vomit and comforted tears. That house where she now reigns as I am the intruder. When did everything change? Was it when I became a widow and useless, when I broke my hip and needed help to move, when I could no longer care for my grandchildren as before? Or was it simply the passage of time that made me invisible? Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night. At night, I searched for the scent of my husband, that gentle aroma of coffee and tobacco. It made me feel safe, but he is no longer here, and now that he is gone, everything seems to be falling apart. The car turned onto a wider avenue. I recognized the way. We had passed here once before when we took an old friend to the same place they would drop me off now. He cried the entire trip. I comforted him. I told him he was not alone. What irony. "It's almost time," said Carla, glancing at her watch. "I hope there won't be much traffic. We have dinner tonight." They were in a hurry to get rid of me. I clenched my fists. I felt the suitcase shake on my lap. I promised myself not to break down. I was not going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me defeated. And then, just as the traffic light turned red, my phone rang with a sharp, unexpected tone. An old-fashioned ringtone, my old cell phone, the one almost nobody calls. Carla gave me a look of displeasure. "Who is calling you now?" she snapped. I did not answer. I picked up the phone with trembling hands, an unknown number. I hesitated and answered. "Hello." Silence. 1 second, 2, and then the voice. "Isabel, it's me, Arturo. I know what they are doing to you. Don't say anything, just listen. You are not alone. I am already waiting for you." My breath caught. It was impossible. Arturo, my first love, the one I thought was lost forever. How did he know? Why now? "I am exactly where they are taking me, and I will not let you stay." The call ended. I did not have time to reply. Carla was watching me. Suspecting something, Michael kept driving, but I was no longer the same person. A spark ignited inside me, something I thought had been extinguished, a flame, a promise. And they still had no idea what was about to unfold. Some believe that old age strikes suddenly, that one day you simply wake up and no longer matter. But it does not happen like that. Abandonment arrives gradually, like a rain that begins with a single drop and eventually drowns everything. I was not always this stooped woman with weary eyes and slow steps. No, I used to be laughter, passion, a mother who gave everything, a wife who emptied herself for love, a woman who knew how to postpone her dreams to build others' hopes. I was born in a small village, one of those places where everyone knows one another and no one forgets. My parents were simple people. My father was a carpenter, my mother a seamstress. From them, I learned that love is shown through actions, not words. That dignity is worn like an invisible coat, something you must endure but never lose. I met Arturo when I was 18. He was everything a young woman could dream of. Brave, idealistic, with a smile that melted every fear. But life had different plans. My father fell ill. My mother slipped into despair. There was no money and no future. And Arturo wanted to travel the world. I needed to stay and care for them. I chose to be a daughter instead of a woman. He left. I stayed. Soon after, I met Hernan. He was not like Arturo. He was serious, hard-working, and above all, safe. Michael proposed to me shortly after we met. "I can offer you stability," he said. I agreed, not for love, but for peace. We had 3 children. Michael was the firstborn. He arrived during an especially cold winter. Holding him in my arms, I knew everything was worth it. His cry became my fuel, his life my purpose. Time went by. I became a full-time mother. I stopped painting, reading, and writing my poems. I cooked, cleaned, and took care of the household. Every morning started before the sun rose. Every night ended after everyone was asleep. My back ached, but I never complained, never once. Mothers do not complain. They love, even when no one sees them. Michael grew up quickly. He was a sensitive and tender boy. He would follow me around the house like a little duckling. "Mommy, don't go," he would say when I left for the market, and I promised I would always be there. Always. I held his hand walking to school. I waited for him under the rain, dressed in his blue raincoat. I sang lullabies to him, healed his scraped knees, was his shelter, his everything. Then he began to change. Adolescence became a boundary. Suddenly, he no longer wanted my kisses. He was embarrassed for me to wait at the door. He started speaking with a cold tone, locking himself in his room and defying his father. I tried to understand. "It's just the age," Hernan said. But it hurt me because every time he pulled away, I felt a piece of my soul being torn away. Michael enrolled in university and became a lawyer, the very first in our family to achieve this. I was immensely proud. I cried on his graduation day and he gave me a quick, hurried hug as if all that affection annoyed him, but I let it go. He always acted that way. At a family gathering, he met Carla. Carla's smile was flawless, like porcelain, and her gaze sharp and piercing. From the start, I sensed something off about her, a sort of disdain hidden behind polite manners. She spoke to me as if I were a servant. She corrected me in front of others and referred to me in the third person when talking to Michael. "Your mother should not comment on this," and "Your mother always makes a big deal out of everything," were her usual remarks. At first, Michael defended her, claiming that I was overreacting and it was just her way of being. But I saw beyond that. I saw how she judged me, how much my presence irritated her, how she positioned herself between my son and me. Every conversation with her was like walking through a minefield. One evening during dinner, Carla casually remarked, "When we get married, we will need the guest room for the study." The guest room was mine. It became clear she did not want me close. Michael simply smiled. After their marriage, everything sped up. I moved out and lived alone for a while. I still worked babysitting, but the loneliness was heavy. Then, when I fell down the stairs and broke my hip, Michael insisted I come live with them. "This way we can take care of you," he said. However, what I experienced was far from care. I realized it was surveillance, criticism, conditions. Carla established rules. Do not enter the kitchen without permission. Do not interrupt when we have visitors. Do not give sweets to the children. Do not spoil them so much. You are ruining them. I became a shadow, a nuisance wrapped in a cotton robe. Still, I kept cooking. I prepared their favorite dishes. I washed their clothes, cared for my grandchildren with love, even when Carla forbade me. This was my nature, to give even when it hurt, even if no one expressed gratitude. One day, I overheard Michael arguing with Carla. She demanded they take me to a nursing home, saying the time had come. Her life was stuck. She could no longer live with an old woman who judged everything. He did not refuse, but asked for a little more time. The following week, he started bringing brochures from residences of Asuentos Mir, places for seniors. "Just in case," he said, but his eyes avoided mine. I knew the decision was already made. Then Christmas arrived. I spent the entire day cooking, making bread, turkey, tamales, and punch. I carefully set the table. I wore the sweater Diane, my granddaughter, had given me. I waited. When they arrived, they did not even look at me. Carla inspected the table and said, "Too much fat. This is not healthy for the children." Michael said nothing. That night, while they toasted, I sat alone in the kitchen and cried for the first time in years. Not for what they said, but for what they did not say, because I was no longer part of them, because I was no longer seen. That was the moment I realized it. My place no longer belonged in that house. From that Christmas onward, everything within me began to shift. Something inside me died that night. Something that had kept my back straight for years, even during the toughest times. Every morning I woke feeling like I was superfluous in the home, like an old piece of furniture no one dared to throw away out of respect, yet still a burden. Carla no longer even pretended. She deliberately ignored me. If I spoke, she would get up. Whenever I entered the living room, she left. She told the children not to spend too much time with me and to ignore me if I told them strange stories. Strange stories. That is what she called the tales I used to invent to lull them to sleep. The very stories that made Diane laugh when she was little, and the very same ones that filled Michael's childhood with magic. Days became dull, repetitive, and painful. I wandered through the house as if I were a ghost. I heard laughter behind closed doors and footsteps that stopped whenever I came near. My hands continued cooking, cleaning, and looking after the grandchildren when Carla went to the gym or out for lunch with her friends. But it was as if I was invisible. Sometimes I caught myself wishing to fall ill just so they would have to look at me, so they would be forced to notice me. Yet life did not grant me even that. Though my body grew weary, it kept carrying on. My thoughts, however, began to darken. One day, Carla arranged an important dinner. Some of Michael's business partners were going to come. She asked me in a cold tone to please stay in my room. "It is not personal, Isabel," she said, "but these are important people, and we need everything to look professional. Professional as if my presence would spoil their picture-perfect home." Naturally, I locked myself in my room like a punished child. I heard laughter by the door, the clinking of glasses, hurried footsteps, and there I was, alone in my floral robe with a cup of cold tea. That night, I wrote in my notebook, something I had not done for a long time. "I am becoming invisible," I noted. "Every day I see myself less in their eyes. Each word they do not speak to me erases me a little more." Carla began leaving hints. She left brochures in the kitchen with names of retirement homes, recreational activities for seniors, they said. One day, she even brought an empty cardboard box and placed it in my room, saying, "Whenever you want, you can start packing. No rush," she said with a forced smile. Michael seemed distant. He no longer hugged me like before. He did not ask how I felt. He only greeted me from afar with a rushed "hello, Mom" before heading up to the studio to work. When I tried to talk to him, he would get distracted by his phone. I would hear later, "Mom, I am busy with 1,000 things." One afternoon, Diane came looking for her school backpack. She entered my room without knocking, as she used to do when she was younger. She hugged me without saying a word. I felt something inside her was broken as well. She confessed she did not like the way they treated me, that she had noticed. I heard Carla say it was time to let go of Grandma. She begged me not to leave, to wait for her, that she would do something, but I told her not to interfere. I did not want anyone to get hurt because of me. A few days later, Carla bluntly told me she had already arranged a place at a residence, a very nice spot, with a garden and activities for people your age, Isabel. You could make friends, take up your hobbies again. The way she spoke made it seem like she was doing me a favor, like she was freeing me, but her eyes showed relief, not sympathy. Michael did not look at me when he confirmed it. He said it was better for everyone, that I deserved to be somewhere they would care for me and where I would be comfortable. He said it as if sending me to a spa, not a nursing home. I felt my spirit fall to the ground. That night I packed, not because I wanted to, but because I realized fighting was pointless. I sat on the bed with the suitcase open in front of me. Every piece of clothing I folded was a suppressed tear. I packed my favorite shawl, some books, photos of my children when they still hugged me freely, and an old notebook where I used to write my thoughts. I had forgotten about it. It was at the bottom of the drawer. I opened it, and there it was. A letter from Diane, written in crayons when she was 6 years old. "Grandma, I love you to the sky and beyond." I held it close to my chest and allowed myself to cry silently, just as I always did. The next morning was bleak. Michael offered to give me a ride. Carla stayed at home. He helped me lift the suitcase into the car without even saying sorry. I sat in the front passenger seat with my hands clasped over my knees. The journey seemed long or maybe short, I cannot really remember. All I know is that Michael remained silent. His gaze was fixed on the road while I watched the scenery, wondering how we had arrived at this point, when he stopped being my son and started seeing me as a burden. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, but something in my chest urged me to pick up. "Grandma, it's me, Diane. Don't go to the nursing home. Wait for me. I need you. Please don't let them take you away," her trembling voice said. She was crying. My heart stopped. "I'm on my way," she added before hanging up. I froze. Michael glanced at me with a furrowed brow. "Who was that?" he asked. "No one," I replied. But my mind had already drifted far away. Something had shifted. Diane, my granddaughter, my little one, had called because she needed me. We arrived at the nursing home, a large building with gray walls and a neatly trimmed garden. Michael parked the car, sighed, and got out. He opened the door for me and took my suitcase. "Come on, Mom," he said. We walked toward the entrance. My body trembled and my feet felt as heavy as lead. Each step felt like a farewell. Then, as we passed through the main gate, I saw her. There was Diane, standing in front of the door with red eyes but a steady voice. "You are not going in here. She is coming with me." Silence grew heavy. Michael looked at her with confusion. "Diane, this is not your concern." "Yes, it is," she interrupted firmly. "She raised me, taught me how to read, comforted me when you and Mom shouted, cared for me when I had a fever, told me stories when I could not sleep. She is my grandmother, and I will not allow them to lock her away as if she were a burden." I could not speak, only cried quietly, as I always did. Yet inside, something was awakening. That is when I realized this was far from over. I would not give up without a fight. From the very moment Diane appeared at the entrance of the nursing home, a wave of mixed emotions swept through my body and soul with a force I had not felt for years. Her determined presence, intense gaze, and steady voice made me feel as if for the first time in a long while, someone genuinely cared about me. I was not the forgotten, broken old woman they believed me to be, the one who had nothing left to offer. Diane came like an unstoppable storm, ready to shatter years of silence, neglect, and humiliation. Michael, my son, looked at me with a blend of guilt and annoyance I had learned to recognize as disguised indifference. He tried to push Diane aside with a sharp gesture, but she did not back down even a bit. The tension was thick in the air. I was not sure whether he feared the truth she carried more or his own reaction. His wife, the relentless Carla, waited like a dark shadow, ready to consume any sign of defiance. Diane, fearless, reminded them that I was not a burden, that I had been the woman who raised them, who had stayed awake for their sake, who sacrificed my own dreams so they could follow theirs. At last, the head of the silo appeared, a woman with an unreadable expression, carrying the coldness that comes from learning to emotionally disconnect in a place filled with sorrow and abandonment. When she saw Diane, her face shifted slightly as if sensing a threat in her presence. But Diane was not there to play games. With a firm tone, she demanded an immediate meeting to discuss my situation. The director agreed, though she made it clear that time was limited and she would not tolerate any dramatics. They led us into a small, cold, impersonal room that seemed purposely designed to make anyone feel insignificant and exposed. Diane began speaking without pause, her passion almost tangible. She recounted my story, my struggle, the sleepless nights spent caring for Michael when he was a child, the years of tireless work to ensure no one in the family went hungry or lacked anything. She spoke of the moments when I put their needs before my own. She described how, despite everything, In my final years, I was met with nothing but indifference and scorn. As I listened to her words, Diane, I felt something stirring deep inside me. It was as if a faint light had switched on amidst a darkness I believed would last forever. I was not alone. Someone believed in me. Someone was ready to fight for my dignity. The director and the staff at the nursing home did not seem equipped to face this reality. Diane's words challenged their habitual indifference and neglect. After that meeting, Diane took me to her closest friend's house, a humble place filled with warmth and humanity, far from the cold, impersonal walls of the nursing home. There, for the first time in ages, I felt I could breathe freely, simply be myself without fear or shame. The friendship and affection they gave me soothed my wounded spirit. Days passed, weeks went by, and with each visit from Diane, my spirit lifted. It was not just her constant presence and unconditional support, but also the hope she brought me. We began to dream of a different future, one where I could regain my independence, where I was not a burden, but a person with the right to make my own choices. Yet the enemy was still alert. Carla and Michael started sending messages and making calls filled with veiled threats, trying to force me back, to make me accept the fate they had decided for me without my consent. Their words were sharp knives aimed at breaking me, but this time I was no longer vulnerable, ready to abandon me, defeated. A particularly harsh letter arrived one afternoon filled with words that cut deeper than the coldest winter. Carla called me a burden, a nuisance, someone better forgotten. I felt that hatred growing into a wall separating me from the family I once cherished. But this time, I was not alone facing this storm. With Diane's support, we reached out to a lawyer who specialized in senior rights. He explained that legally, they could not force me to live somewhere against my will, and that I had rights deserving respect. That news became a beacon of hope in the midst of the turmoil. With each passing day, my courage and spirit began to strengthen. We started exploring options for my life, community programs, activities for older adults, chances to learn and connect. I no longer wanted to be a forgotten shadow. I wanted to be a living, respected woman who had a voice and could make decisions. However, the struggle was far from easy. Carla escalated her attacks, using all her power to manipulate Michael, who wavered between guilt and resignation. At one point, he nearly gave in, asking me to understand that he only wanted what was best for me. But this time, I did not fall for the lies. Diane was my rock and my strength. She reminded me every single day that I deserved respect and that I was a valuable woman, not a burden, but a person with history and dignity. Her words became my armor against disdain. One day, Diane organized a family gathering. She invited everyone, including Carla and Michael, with the purpose of confronting the truth and demanding respect for me. The atmosphere was unbearable. Hidden emotions broke through every glance and every restrained sigh. As I entered the room, I saw them all there, some with tears welling up, others wearing hardened expressions, yet everyone stared at me like a ghost from the past. With a steady voice, although shaken by emotion, I began to share my story. I spoke about my years of sacrifice and my unconditional love. I described the injustice and disdain I had endured, telling them I deserved respect, that I would not tolerate being treated like a disposable object, and that my dignity was sacred. The silence that followed was heavy, awkward, filled with regret and truth. Some wept, others lowered their gaze, and Diane squeezed my hand tightly, conveying the pride and love she felt for me. For the first time in a long while, I sensed that my voice was truly heard, that my story mattered. That night, I slept with a peace I had not felt for many years. I knew the battle was not over, yet I now had the strength to move forward. The dignity I believed was lost began to revive, nurtured by my granddaughter's love and my own unwavering determination. After that meeting, which seemed to crack open a small breach in my family's wall of indifference, I thought that things began to shift, yet reality quickly showed me that the battle ahead was far more brutal and complex than I had imagined. The antagonist in this story, Carla, was unwilling to give up even an inch. Her hatred and bitterness intensified each day, fueled by her need to dominate and control everything around her. What she perceived as a direct threat to her influence over Michael and the family, I saw as a chance to defend my honor and reclaim my life. It did not take long for Carla to reveal her true motives. It started with constant phone calls to Diane filled with insults and veiled threats. Then came the written messages with cutting words, accusing us of lying, attempting to destabilize the family, and ruining Michael's reputation. But the most painful moment was when she began pulling strings from the shadows to initiate legal action against me, claiming mental incompetence and danger to myself, trying to have me sent back to the asylum, this time with court orders. That was when I realized this fight would not only be emotional, but legal as well. Diane and I found ourselves trapped in a maze of paperwork, lawyers, documents, and hearings. It felt as if the entire world was collapsing on me, yet something inside burned fiercely, a flame that refused to be extinguished. I could not allow Carla to win, not after everything that had happened. We were supported. The lawyer who assisted us played a crucial role. His expertise and knowledge acted like a beacon in the darkness. He explained that the law was on our side, that as long as I was capable of expressing my will, no one could force me to live somewhere against my wishes. Yet he also warned us that Carla would use every trick in the book to manipulate the system and make me appear weak or incapable. The hearings were dreadful. Feeling judged as if I were a rebellious child or a helpless old woman was degrading. Carla was present at every session with that bitter smile and calculating look, ready to tear me down. Michael, who at first seemed neutral, gradually distanced himself, allowing his wife to take full control. However, a turning point came that changed everything. During one hearing, one of my grandchildren, Javier, unexpectedly burst in. Javier was always different. The family rebel who refused to fit into the rules or the demands of Carla and Michael. With a steady voice and eyes full of tears, he spoke about the love and respect he had for his grandmother. He shared stories that no one else dared to recall, moments when I was his refuge, his comfort, his inspiration. His testimony moved even the judge. Carla's face showed restrained anger, but she could not prevent Javier's words from hitting deeply. That intervention was crucial for the judge to rule in my favor, acknowledging my ability and right to make decisions about my own life. However, the battle did not end there. Carla intensified her tactics by using emotional blackmail and manipulations in an attempt to break my will. Michael became a man torn, caught between loyalty to his wife and love for his mother. Sometimes he asked me to give in, to do it for them, for the family, but I could no longer back down. In those dark moments, Diane was my rock. Her constant presence, unconditional support, and courage gave me strength to carry on. She reminded me that my dignity was worth more than any fear or pain, and that I deserved to live a full life with respect. We began to plan the next stage, reclaiming my independence, finding a place where I could live with dignity and surrounded by affection, far from the nursing home and scorn. I had discovered a group of people offering support to seniors to live in a community with activities and respect for their autonomy. It was a true hope, but Carla was unwilling to allow it. With the help of some influential acquaintances, she sought to block my plans. She arranged for my finances to be reviewed, my mental health questioned, and doubts to be planted within the community. It was an all-out assault on my integrity and reputation. I felt the shadow of defeat lurking close, yet then something unexpected happened. A longtime friend from my youth, Mr. Ricardo, re-entered my life. A wise and kind-hearted man, he had been a cornerstone in my past and now became an essential ally. His support was unwavering. He offered me his home to stay temporarily and helped gather evidence and testimonies that showcased my resilience and strength. With Mr. Ricardo by my side, I felt empowered. I not only had a safe place, but also a partner who believed in me and fought alongside me. Together, we started crafting a plan to confront Carla and reclaim the peace that had been stolen from me. Amid all of this, Diane uncovered that Carla had forged documents to discredit me, an illegal act that could turn the tide in the trial. Armed with this proof, we filed a formal complaint, delivering a powerful blow that threatened Carla and her scheme. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Carla began losing her supporters. Her web of lies started to collapse. Michael, confused and torn apart, started to doubt his own choices. Meanwhile, despite the exhaustion and sorrow I carried, I felt a newfound strength, a firm determination to prevent hatred and cruelty from prevailing. Every day was a struggle, but also a step toward freedom. Diane and Mr. Ricardo were my shields, my light during the darkest times. My family began to see me as more than a fragile, elderly woman. They saw a brave woman fighting with courage who refused to be defeated. I refused to vanish without being heard. The change that had started months ago was now becoming noticeable. I was no longer just a survivor, but a fighter. My voice, once muted, now echoed powerfully through the halls of authority and within the hearts of those who knew me. Then, just as everything seemed about to collapse, the final hearing arrived, a critical moment when truth and justice would confront each other directly. The burden of years, of wounds, of struggle rested in my hands. I understood that it would not be simple, but I also knew that regardless of the outcome, I had already earned something priceless, the respect for myself. The day of the trial dawned beneath a gray, thick, and heavy sky, as if nature itself grasped the significance of this moment and wore mourning for what was about to be decided. That mourning was not just a beginning, it was the boundary between hope and oblivion, between dignity regained and the invisible prison others wanted to impose on me. I woke up before dawn, body tired but soul burning with a persistent flame. Looking into the mirror, I saw the reflection of a transformed woman, one who had weathered unseen storms yet held her gaze firm, even if her eyes contained the sadness of many years. I remembered every wound, every imposed silence, every lie I had endured, but I also recalled my struggle, the perseverance of someone determined to prevail. The suitcase was ready, not only filled with clothes, but also with all my memories, my hopes, and the determination to prove that I was not a burden, but a human being entitled to make my own choices. The metallic sound of the zipper closing felt like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, a chapter where I would finally have the chance to be heard. Upon arriving at the courtroom, the atmosphere was almost suffocating. The room was packed with faces that seemed to judge me even before I spoke. I could sense Carla's presence, lurking and poisonous, her mocking smile aimed at breaking me, and Michael's cold indifference piercing through me like an invisible dagger. The judge, an older man with a stern gaze, ordered the hearing to begin, and the silence fell over the room like a heavy cloak, covering every word about to be spoken. Carla's lawyers unleashed a series of cold, calculated arguments. They portrayed me as an incapable, confused elderly woman, one who had lost her mind and posed a danger not only to herself but also to the family. Their words were like knives trying to reopen old wounds to paint me as a helpless victim. But what they truly sought was to strip me of my freedom. Each sentence echoed cruelly in my ears, yet I stood firm with controlled breathing and a pounding heart, fully aware that this was my moment to fight. I had to respond with truth and strength. When it was my turn, I stood up certain that this was the most crucial fight I had ever faced. My voice trembled at first, yet soon became steady and clear. I spoke from the depths of my soul, sharing my story without any embellishments. With the honesty of someone who has endured pain and loved deeply, I recounted the years of sacrifice, the endless nights spent caring for my children and grandchildren, and the tears no one ever saw, which I quietly carried within. I described Carla's betrayal, her lies, her manipulations, and how she had tried to drive a wedge between me and my family to control my life. I expressed my yearning to live with dignity and independence, to be the master of my own fate rather than a disposable object. Then, amid the heavy atmosphere, an unexpected voice broke through. Michael, my grandson, spoke with such sincerity that it moved everyone present. He shared his truth, recalling the joyful moments we had shared, how he witnessed Carla's injustice and manipulation, and his unconditional love for me. His testimony was like a beam of light piercing the courtroom's darkness, a brave act that seemed to awaken something buried deep within the hearts of those listening. I saw reflected in his eyes a renewed hope, and his support became the shield I needed to remain strong. Carla, feeling trapped, tried to respond out of desperation, but her words sounded hollow and weak. Michael, until that moment, he had remained silent until he finally broke his silence, expressing regret and his support for my right to make decisions about my own life. That unexpected alliance gave me renewed strength. The judge called for a break to deliberate, and during those moments I could feel the tension spreading through the room. Outside, Mr. Ricardo and Diane were waiting for me. Their eyes, full of anxiety and hope, became my support amid the storm. When the judge returned, the silence was complete. He began reading the verdict, and every word he spoke seemed to break invisible chains that had kept me trapped for so long. He acknowledged my full capacity to make decisions, dismissed the lies and manipulations of Carla, and ordered that my autonomy be respected. This was a victory that went beyond legal boundaries. It was an acknowledgement of my humanity, my inalienable right to live with dignity and freedom. I could not hold back tears, but this time they were tears of triumph and liberation. Upon leaving the court, the burden I had carried for years lifted for a moment. The crowd dispersed, but I felt the invisible embrace of all those who had believed in me. Still, I knew the true battle was only beginning. Carla refused to accept defeat and started weaving a web of slanders, lies, and blackmail. She tried to isolate me from friends and neighbors, spreading discord and resentment, using every tool at her disposal to continue her assault. I was determined not to let anyone undermine my new life, but I was no longer the fragile and lonely woman they had tried to portray. With the unwavering support of Diane and Mr. Ricardo, I faced every challenge with patience and courage. Gradually, I rebuilt my self-confidence. I discovered within myself the strength to move forward and learned to surround myself with people who valued and respected me. I immersed myself in the community and participated in activities that nourished my soul and helped me reconnect with life. I wrote my memoirs, a way to exorcise the ghosts of the past and give voice to my story. I met new individuals who showed me that growing older is not a sentence, but an opportunity to be reborn and reinvent oneself. Unexpectedly, love returned to my life in a different, deeper, and more liberating form. Each day was a test, a struggle, but also a triumph. With every sunrise, I found myself stronger, more confident, more alive. At last, I arrived at the place I had always dreamed of, a community where aging was respected, where stories like mine were heard and cherished. There, I closed the door on my past with a sigh of relief and hope. I had won the most crucial battle, that of my dignity, that of my soul. I knew that no matter what happened, I would never let anyone decide for me. The future awaited me, uncertain but mine, to be lived with the freedom I had fought so hard to regain. After all I had been through, the feeling of liberation was overwhelming. Freedom was a fire burning within my chest, a flame that no one could ever extinguish. It was not merely a physical release from that asylum where they had tried to confine me as if I were a forgotten object or a nuisance, but a deep inner liberation that only arises when you decide to leave behind fear, humiliation, and years of accumulated sorrow. It felt as if a heavy chain had shattered and dropped to the ground with a dull sound that made me shiver with emotion and disbelief. Was I truly free? Could I begin anew? Yes, I could. However, this freedom did not come easily or suddenly. It was the outcome of a long and quiet struggle against the shadows that had pursued me. The phone call I received on the way to the asylum, the one that interrupted the fate that had been written for me without my consent, marked the start of something unexpected. When I answered, I heard the trembling and remorseful voice of my son Michael, who confessed that after years of silence and resentment, he had decided to find me. This was not simply a call to stop my admission. It was a sincere attempt at reconciliation, a brave gesture that touched me deeply. He told me he had realized the unfairness of his actions and wanted to make amends for the harm he had caused. That moment was filled with confusion and hope, a blend of emotions that paralyzed me and overwhelmed me with questions. When I arrived at the asylum, I did not find the same place I had feared. Neither loneliness nor the coldness I had imagined appeared. Instead, I found Michael waiting for me, his eyes filled with tears and the look of someone who has learned to appreciate what was lost far too late. That unexpected and deeply awaited reunion marked a turning point in my life. I felt as if time was moving backward and forward simultaneously. At first, we exchanged silent glances, weighed down by the burden of many years that had come between us. Yet in that heavy quiet, there was also the promise of a fresh start. I could see in his gaze genuine remorse and a sincere wish to rebuild what we had destroyed. The following days blended moments of reconciliation and healing. Michael and I held long talks, bringing to light old wounds, painful silences, and the words left unspoken. We acknowledged our flaws, his mistakes and mine, but most importantly, we resolved not to let the past define us or drive us apart forever. It was a slow process full of tears, honest confessions, and forgiveness. I learned that love, even when hurt, can recover if nurtured with patience and truthfulness. The relationship I once believed lost forever began to rise from the ashes, carrying with it a new hope that inspired me to keep moving forward. However, my story did not end with this family reconciliation. The shelter that I initially thought would be my prison soon transformed into a place of connection, learning, and growth. Solidarity. There, I met women and men who, like me, had been neglected by their families but found refuge and a new sense of belonging within that community. I began to engage actively, organizing events, workshops, and support groups for those battling abandonment and loneliness. It was in that place that I realized the power of community and the significance of never giving up, even when everything seems lost. Over time, I chose to share my story with the world. Writing my memoirs became an act of courage and liberation. Each word written on the page was a wound healing, a truth coming to light, and a message I wanted others to hear. My book did not just tell the story of a mother who had been abandoned and humiliated, but also that of a woman who found strength in her pain to rise again and rebuild herself. The release was met with a mix of shock, empathy, and admiration. Women from all over reached out to thank me and to say that my story gave them the courage to face their own struggles. Fame and public recognition were never my goals, yet they arrived naturally as a result of sharing my truth. I took part in television programs, talks, and events where I could give a voice to those who had none. I became an advocate for the rights of older adults, fighting against abandonment, emotional abuse, and indifference. My fight ceased to be merely personal and transformed into a movement aimed at changing how elderly people are viewed and treated in our society. Meanwhile, my private life continued to grow. I discovered sincere friendship and a platonic love that acted as a healing balm for my deepest wounds. I did not need a prince to come to my rescue, but rather individuals who accepted me with all my strengths and flaws, and who stood by me unconditionally. I learned to love myself, to appreciate my worth, and to embrace solitude as a sacred space where I could connect with my true self and my dreams. The inner peace I attained became perhaps my greatest victory. One of the most meaningful moments was the public testimony of my granddaughter Valeria. During the trial supporting my autonomy and dignity, she spoke with such honesty and affection that it moved everyone deeply. Her courage to defend me, to face the harsh indifference of her mother, and to advocate on my behalf was a profound act of pure love. It showed that change was indeed possible. Even amid the most painful family conflict, Valeria became my unwavering ally, a living hope that families can be rebuilt through respect and empathy. Looking back, I realized that my life had been a journey marked by darkness and storms, but also illuminated by light and valuable lessons. I had transformed from an invisible and mistreated woman into a person both respected and admired. Not because justice had favored me in legal terms, but because I had reclaimed my dignity, my voice, and my place in the world. I realized the true victory was not in defeating others, but in overcoming my own fears and biases. At last, the phrase with which I concluded my story echoed like a call I wanted to reach every woman suffering silently. Do not let anyone decide for you who you are or what you are worth. True freedom begins when you reclaim your voice, even if the world tries to silence you. That sentence became my mantra, my legacy, a call to resilience, hope, and self-love. With the calm that time brings, I looked ahead with confidence. I knew life would remain unpredictable and hardships would still arise, but I was prepared because I had learned to walk in darkness without losing faith in the light. For me, that was the greatest triumph. I am sitting on this old rocking chair I inherited from my mother, a piece of furniture worn by time and by the tears I once shed in this very place where I often felt the weight of abandonment and loneliness. The house is quiet, almost empty, but inside me is a whirlwind of memories returning again and again like ghosts refusing to vanish. I hold on to this brief calm because I know it is a gift after such a storm. That storm was long. The darkness felt endless at times. Looking back, I see the young woman I once was, filled with dreams and hopes, who devoted her entire life to her family with unconditional love. My name is Isabel. I am 68 years old, and for decades I worked as a teacher, a guide, and the backbone of my home. I was the woman who held the lives of my children and grandchildren in her hands, believing that my sacrifice alone would be enough to be loved and respected. However, as the years passed, that backbone began to crack under the weight of neglect and forgetfulness. I remember countless sleepless nights caring for my sick husband while my children slept, unaware of the sacrifices I was making for them. Days spent preparing breakfasts, lunches, and dinners, making sure nothing was missing, ensuring everything was perfect to keep the family united. Yet the love I poured out was never enough. It was not reciprocated, nor appreciated. The first signs of distance were small and almost unnoticed. A glance that was avoided, a message left unanswered, a silence that grew longer. It was Carla, my daughter-in-law, who started carving the final rift in our relationship. Her poisonous words, controlling and manipulative behavior, and her constant insinuations that I was a burden, an obstacle for the family, She was the one who convinced Michael, my eldest son, that the best thing for me was a nursing home, a place where I would supposedly be better cared for. The humiliation came slowly, like a creeping shadow. A shadow grew unnoticed, quietly expanding without me realizing. Visits became increasingly rare, phone calls vanished, and the cold rejection from my own son pierced me deeply like a sharp knife. I felt invisible, nothing more than a shadow in the lives of those I once loved with all my heart. I tried to hold on, keeping hope alive that this emotional winter would pass and that love would once again light up our family. But then Carla's harsh words stopped me in my tracks. "My children have decided that a nursing home is best for you, Isabel. There is no longer a place for you here." It was like a verdict without any chance for defense. I, who had given my entire life, reduced to something disposable. I remained silent. My dignity was all I had left. With trembling hands, I packed my suitcase, leaving behind the home where my children grew up, where every corner was built with love and sacrifice. As I said goodbye to those walls, I wondered how we had come to this point. The car ride was a silent torment. Then a call came through, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. Arturo, an old friend from my youth, the man who never forgot the woman I used to be, was on the line. He offered me an unexpected chance, a new path to rediscover myself. When we arrived at the nursing home, someone awaited me, a person who not only welcomed me with respect, but saw me as worthy, strong, and full of potential. The place that first felt like a prison soon began to reveal a different side. It became a sanctuary where I could begin to rebuild my life. With each passing day, wandering through the quiet corridors and hearing the voices of friends, I found a new family. The friendships with other residents, the understanding shared with those who truly knew me, offered a chance to rediscover my forgotten dreams. I started to write my story, a tale that turned into a cry for justice for many women who suffer in silence. My granddaughter, Diane, was Mafaro, a young woman who was both rebellious and sensitive. She fought against the family's prejudices, defended my dignity, and gave me her unconditional love. Alongside Michael, who with patience and tenderness helped me heal the wounds from the past, we faced the dark shadow of Carla. She tried to silence me with threats and lies, but as always, the truth found its way. The trial was a difficult battle, a ground on which I defended my right to life, respect, and love. Justice made its presence known, though not without pain and sacrifice. Yet beyond the legal victory, I gained something far more precious: respect, true love, and a new family built on the foundations of honesty and sincere affection. Now in this final chapter of my life, I write with an open heart. Every word is a declaration of strength and hope. I have learned that freedom is not a physical place but a state of the soul. True family is made up of those who choose you every day, not just those connected by blood. And even when darkness surrounds us, there is always light. There is a light that leads us. Every morning I wake up filled with gratitude, aware of the path I have traveled and the legacy I wish to create. I want my story to serve as a beacon for all women who still feel the chill of abandonment, a proof that human dignity cannot be defeated and that deep down everyone deserves love, respect, and a chance to find happiness once more. With a voice steady yet filled with emotion, I close this chapter of my life with words that have stayed with me since then. No matter how dark the night, dawn always arrives for those brave enough to fight. This is my truth, my legacy, and my call to every woman to keep believing in herself and to never give up.